S rank, one-shot kill. Reward issued, lifespan plus 3 years. Hidden reward, true martial essence. Passive, you have seen through the true nature of every technique in the world. As the system chime fell, a surge of energy more savage and burning than anything before slammed into my body through the void channel. My head snapped back. I clenched my jaw with everything I had. I could hear every bone in my body cracking. The muscles that had still been somewhat thin from recovering were now tightening and filling out at a visible rate, packed with explosive power. If Shadow 2 had given me the mental power of a spell god, then Shadow 3 had pushed my physical strength to the level of a human-shaped predator. I sat quietly absorbing the rewards. What I didn't know was this. The moment Shadow 3's punch detonated the Warlord, the brief 10-second completion clip had been automatically captured by the system and posted anonymously on the Abyss Forum's martial arts section, the largest underground platform for Transcendence worldwide. At first, nobody noticed the post titled, "Anonymous Challenger Clears Pinnacle Floor 9 with One Punch," until half an hour later, when a verified first-rank martial master clicked on it and posted a comment consisting entirely of exclamation marks. The entire underground martial world erupted. Yungju, headquarters of the Heavenly Martial Sect, an ancient sect built into sheer cliffsides, recognized as one of the world's foremost sacred grounds of martial mastery. Right now, in the sect's innermost Elder Hall, the atmosphere was suffocating. Over a dozen martial titans, men whose footsteps alone made the outside world tremble, now sat gathered around a massive holographic projection table, staring hard at the footage looping on the screen. In it, a pitch-black, featureless figure facing the Warlord's earth-shattering charge. "Slow it down, slower, 100 times speed reduction." The Grand Elder slammed the table. His voice was raw. The footage dropped to extreme slow motion. No one dared breathe. They saw it clearly. The black figure never looked at the Warlord's movement. Before the Warlord even committed to the strike, the Shadow had already taken that step and thrown that punch. The fist hung in empty air. 0.1 seconds later, the Warlord ran straight into it and exploded into mist. In the silent conference room, someone swallowed hard. What technique is that? Prediction? Impossible. The Warlord's speed and adaptability cannot be predicted. A hot-tempered elder shot to his feet, disbelief written across his face. That Shadow had no opening stance. It threw a completely blind punch. How could a blind punch land perfectly on the kill point? It wasn't blind. The sect leader, who had been sitting at the head of the table with his eyes shut, suddenly opened them. He stared hard at the frozen frame. Something unprecedented, raw fear, detonated in those clouded eyes. An elder stared at the replay, fingers trembling. That punch, it looks like it was thrown at the future. The room went so silent it felt like the air had been sucked out. No one could answer the Grand Elder, because to these Grandmasters, the faceless Shadow's movements had gone completely beyond the domain of martial arts, and touched something that made their skin crawl. Cause and effect itself. Find it. At any cost. The sect leader stood abruptly. His clouded eyes were shot through with red. Turn the world upside down if you must. Find this person's real identity. If we can bring them in, the sect will command the entire global martial world, and if we cannot, he didn't finish. Everyone understood. If they couldn't, then before this person became a true god, they had to be erased completely. Meanwhile, back in the real world, in my cramped, rundown rental, I sat cross-legged on the bed, using the newly emerged sliver of spell god mental power to slip into the Abyss Forum without a trace. I watched the bounties skyrocketing across the forum, the wanted notices from every major faction, sect, and special agency flooding every thread. I couldn't help a short, cold laugh. Looking for me? You don't even know if I'm human. How exactly are you going to find me? But it was a useful reminder. Fame brings danger. My body had escaped its death sentence, had even surpassed the physical and mental limits of ordinary humans. But, against the colossal forces that controlled heavy weapons transcendence, I was still fragile as paper. If they found out that the spell god who burned through the maze and the martial god who pulverized the Warlord were both shadows controlled by the same person, they would not hesitate to call in a nuclear strike to erase me. Since you're so desperate to find me, then I'll give you something so massive you won't be able to look at it directly. I rubbed my chin, eyes deepening into something sharp and unhinged. System spend points. Customize a unified disguise appearance for all shadows. Ding. Appearance customization unlocked. Please configure. I sketched the image in my mind at full speed. Moments later, ripples spread across the surfaces of all three shadows, like water. The pure black outlines slowly revealed the deep, wide cloak the color of a starless night, as if it absorbed all light. On the left chest, burned in dark gold, was an ancient emblem, a faceless god, crushing a star in one hand. From today, you are no longer separate. I looked at the three death god figures before me and announced coldly, you are an organization that stands above all laws. Your name is the gods, since I already burned those words into the stone. The gods are merely one person's title. I will make that lie into a truth that shakes the whole world. In the next 2 weeks, I launched a relentless campaign. I needed vast resources to strengthen my body, high-tier transcendent materials to convert into money, and endless trial and death to unlock higher biological limits. So the Gods organization made its entrance across every major dungeon and ruin, with a brutality that left no room for doubt. Border Zone, Thunder Ruins, Gold Rank, a 100-person elite military squad was fighting for its life, surrounded by over 10,000 mutant Thunderwolves, ammunition nearly gone. Just as the squad leader reached for the micronuclear detonator to die with them, a figure in a midnight cloak, the dark gold emblem on the chest, appeared without warning at the center of the battlefield. No firearms, no weapons, just a ghost strolling through the thick web of lightning strikes, a body shaped by 10,000 rewinds. with eyes shut, every blind spot avoided, like the most elite assassin imaginable. Each dagger stroke severing a thunderwolf's artery with surgical precision. 10 minutes later, 10,000 wolf carcasses lay in heaps. The figure stepped onto the wolf king's body, pulled out the invaluable thunder crystal core with bare hands, and didn't spare the stunned military elites a single glance. It simply tossed a metal tag bearing the god's emblem into the blood pool, dissolved into shadow, and vanished. North American Arctic Tundra, Gold Rank. The world's largest resource extraction corporation had hired 3 S-rank Transcendents to hunt the Lord-class creature deep in the tundra, a frost dragon. All 3 S-rank Transcendents were frozen solid by a single breath. Just as the dragon moved to claim its kills, space warped. Another midnight-cloaked figure appeared. Facing the mountain-sized dragon, it simply raised one hand. No incantation, no spell formation, only pure compressed mana. A miniature artificial sun formed in the palm, radiating terrifying heat, and was casually inserted into the dragon's roaring jaws. Hundreds of kilometers of frozen tundra melted into a boiling ocean in an instant. The dragon didn't even scream. It was incinerated from the inside out. Only a single crystalline dragon pearl remained, falling neatly into the figure's hand. Ancient sword tomb, Gold Rank. Countless sword cultivators had been slaughtering each other outside the tomb for a legendary ancient blade. When they finally broke through the outer seals and charged into the core, they found the midnight-cloaked figure already there, its back to them. No sword, just one fist, which shattered the 10,000 sword formation of the entire tomb. Then it pulled the ancient blade free like pulling a carrot from the ground, Force erased the sword's resident spirit and left. In just 2 weeks, the name the gods spread like an unstoppable plague across every corner of the transcendent world. Assassins, spell users, martial fighters, every faction realized in horror that any random member of this organization was invincible at its rank, capable of one-shotting enemies above its tier. They fought with zero wasted movement, like the most precise killing machines imaginable, and they had no fear of death whatsoever. Once, in a toxic swamp, a gods member needed a rare herb, and used its own body as a stepping stone, enduring acid that could melt bone. Every intelligence agency lost its mind. Nothing. Absolutely nothing to find. No DNA traces, no fingerprints, no facial features. They were like data conjured from thin air. Where had the gods come from? Who led them? What did they want? The world's power holders couldn't sleep, terrified of waking one morning to find a faceless cloaked figure standing at the head of their bed. Meanwhile, in the ruins of an S-rank dungeon site that had just been stripped bare, the air still reeked of burned-out mana. The ground was gouged with craters like a meteor strike. A black helicopter bearing the emblem of the top special agency descended slowly to the edge of the wreckage. The door opened. A long, straight leg stepped out. A woman in a black trench coat, a face of extreme cold beauty, hair pulled high, eyes sharp as a freshly honed bayonet. Sylvia, S-rank mental ability transcendent of the special agency, chief investigator known as a living lie detector and the scourge of criminals. She walked in military boots, expressionless, through the devastated ruins. The deeper she went, the tighter her brows drew together. "No signs of a fight," she said coldly, her voice like ice shards colliding. Her deputy hesitated, then said, "Commander, look at these craters everywhere. This was a one-sided slaughter." Sylvia crouched down. Her fingers traced the mirror-smooth cut face of a massive stone. Something flickered deep in her eyes. Real wariness. The creatures had no chance to resist. Didn't even manage an instinctive struggle before being one-shot. The killer's attack patterns are too perfect to be human, more like a supercomputer that has run tens of millions of calculations. She stood and scanned the ruins carefully. Then her gaze locked on the edge of a dark red pool of blood. A half-melted metal fragment lay there quietly. Sylvia walked over, unbothered by the filth, and picked it up with black-gloved fingers. On the fragment, a faint outline of a faceless god and 2 ancient, arrogant characters carved beneath it. The wind around her seemed to stop. She read them quietly. The gods. Then her pupils contracted, because as an S-rank mental ability transcendent, the instant she touched the ash, she felt a mental backlash like a bottomless black hole. Pure indifference. Like a higher being looking down at insects beneath its feet. No emotion, only absolute cold. "Commander, are you all right?" The deputy noticed her face had gone white. He stepped forward quickly. "Don't touch it." Sylvia shoved the fragment into an insulated evidence bag. She drew a slow breath, forcing down the surge of internal disruption. Coldly, "Report to headquarters immediately. The God's threat classification is upgraded to the highest level, double S, World Extinction Hazard. Notify all other regions to prepare for joint action." Back in the real world, my rental. I sat on the sofa, turning the dragon crystal from the Arctic tundra in my hand. This thing would fetch at least $1 billion on the black market, but I just crushed it between my fingers like a walnut, letting the pure frost magic seep in through every pore. I breathed out a white mist laced with ice crystals. The mana reservoir inside me had expanded again. 1 month since the gods had burst onto the scene. In that month, the world's spiritual energy had hit a sudden surge. Countless ancient ruins and folded spaces erupted across the globe. Corporations, sects, special agencies, underground cartels, every faction threw itself at these world-altering resources like sharks smelling blood. But they found, miserably, they were only picking through the gods' leftovers. Every time an S-rank dungeon opened, a midnight cloaked figure was already there first. No teams. No negotiation. Just one-sided slaughter and looting. then gone with the best treasure. Finally, the powerful couldn't stay seated anymore. I watched the brand new high-end laptop on my coffee table, its screen streaming a global live press conference. At the center, a man in a sharp suit, eyes cold and calculating, military hawk representative, guest elder of the Heavenly Marshal sect, and the man behind the world's largest transcendent resource conglomerate, Ethan, both hands braced on the podium, his voice carried across the world. Recently, an illegal transcendent terror organization calling itself the Gods has been seizing strategic resources across the globe, slaughtering dungeon creatures and eliminating other explorers. This is a direct challenge to all human order. He paused, his eyes turned deadly. Therefore, on behalf of the Xingyuan Corporation, the Heavenly Marshal sect, and 16 of the world's top transcendent organizations, I formally announce we are forming the God-Slaying Alliance. As of today, a full-scale campaign against the gods begins. Any person providing information on a gods member will receive 100 million US dollars. Any person who eliminates a gods member will receive one S-rank transcendent artifact. The live-stream comment section detonated. Ethan has lost his mind. Mobilizing 16 top factions against a single organization, that's enough firepower for a third world war. The gods are finished now. No matter how strong, there are only a handful of them. How do you fight the entire world's elite? I looked at Ethan's righteous face on the screen and couldn't help laughing out loud. Come after me? I picked up the cheap instant coffee beside me. You think you're the hunters? Over the next 2 weeks, the God-Slaying Alliance demonstrated terrifying mobilization. They cast a net across the entire world. Every cutting-edge mana detector, satellite system, and even Prophet-class transcendents were deployed, all to find a trace of the gods. I issued the order. Shadows 1, 2, 3, full withdrawal. Enter silence. From the outside, it looked like the gods had been frightened into hiding. Mocking voices appeared on the forums. The so-called gods, just bullies who fold when they meet real resistance. When facing actual power, they run. But I just sat in the rental room and watched with cold eyes. I was waiting for them to gather every last card, every last elite in one place. 3 days later, the opening arrived. A top-secret intelligence report exploded onto the Abyss Forum. An unprecedented S-rank Abyss Rift had appeared above the Mariana Trench in international waters, reportedly containing world tree fruit capable of pushing anyone straight to the demigod threshold, along with a massive quantity of ancient divine artifacts. Ethan reacted immediately. He pulled over 70% of the Alliance's top combat power, 5 S-rank Transcendents, 3 Martial Grandmasters, and a fully armed Mana Warfleet, and sent them thundering toward open waters. Above the Mariana Trench, Ethan stood on the flagship's deck, issuing commands with the air of a man who had already won. A massive mana suppression formation blanketed 100 kilometers of ocean in every direction. Inside that formation, even spatial teleportation would be severed. They thought they were going to take resources. I watched the footage Shadow 1 was feeding back through my right eye. A mocking curve at the corner of my mouth. Shadow 1 was submerged in the deep-sea current, silently watching the enormous fleet above. What they didn't know was that the Double S Rift was bait, lured up from the abyss floor after 10,000 death runs of simulation. I closed my eyes. Consciousness split into 3. Shadow 1, prepare to destroy the formation's core. Shadow 2, go to the rift entrance. Prepare to reverse the abyss energy flow. Shadow 3, I paused. My eyes went absolutely cold. Go to the flagship. Play with them. Inside the flagship's luxury conference room, Ethan stood before a massive holographic sea chart. Around him sat the leaders and top fighters of every major faction. Ladies and gentlemen, the suppression formation is complete. The moment the gods show themselves, this place becomes their grave. Ethan spread the map on the table with a cold smile. However strong the gods may be, they are still prey. From outside the door came a voice even colder. Are you talking about me? The voice was not loud, carried no trace of transcendent energy, like an ordinary person whispering in your ear. But to the room full of people at the top of the world's power structure, it hit like a thunderclap in a clear sky. Who? Ethan spun. The 3 Martial Grandmasters beside him erupted. Force energy solidified into blades and tore through the air, blowing the special alloy cabin door into powder. The dust settled. Nothing outside. What just happened? Detectors showing nothing. An S-rank mental transcendent was drenched in sweat. His mental field covered the entire carrier, and he had felt nothing. Just then, the alarm screamed through every ship in the fleet. Commander, reporting. The suppression formation core at 10,000 meters depth has been severed. Reporting. Abyss energy at the rift entrance is suddenly destabilized, flowing in reverse toward the surface. Reporting. Flagship propulsion system offline. 3 unidentified high-energy signatures on radar. Ethan's face turned iron gray in an instant. He rushed to the porthole and stared hard at the surging sea. The ocean, once blue, had turned churning black. 3 midnight-cloaked figures stood on the surface of the water, as if they had always been there. The gods, someone screamed it in terror. The entire fleet erupted into chaos. Stop panicking! Ethan roared. There are 3 of them. We have thousands. Open fire. Blow them apart. Dozens of mana beams, each capable of erasing an island from the map, poured down onto the 3 figures with annihilating force. But facing that world-ending barrage, the 3 figures didn't move at all. The instant the beams were about to swallow them, a strange black ripple spread across their surfaces. And then, before the eyes of everyone watching in stunned disbelief, the 3 figures that had terrorized the entire world simply ceased to exist. No spatial ripple, no teleportation flash, like an invisible hand had simply erased them from existence. Gone completely. The mana beam slammed into the ocean, and raised a tsunami hundreds of meters high. Ethan froze. Every faction leader froze. Every person watching through satellite feeds across the world froze. Did they run? Ethan murmured in disbelief. Of course they didn't run. Real world. That rundown rental room. I sat bare-chested and cross-legged on the hard plank bed. Curtains sealed tight. Not a trace of light inside. Time to end the game, I said quietly. My voice sounded especially rough in the dark. As my words faded, the air in front of me began violently warping. The first to return was Shadow 1, the assassin who had pushed agility and movement to absolute limits through countless parkour runs and kills. The crack on its featureless face seemed to carry a thread of fevered glee. It dissolved into pure black liquid and slammed into my chest. My body shuddered violently. An indescribable sensation of lightness flooded through me. I could feel my bones becoming hollow and impossibly strong, muscle fibers rearranging in ways that defied biology. The air currents around me, the drift of dust, all of it slowed in my perception to something crystal clear. I even had the illusion that if I wanted to, I could step on the air itself and walk up into the clouds. Then, Shadow 2, the spell god who had burned through the maze, crossed the dimensional boundary and descended before me, radiating a suffocating surge of magic. It merged into my forehead without hesitation. I finally couldn't hold back a low roar. My brain felt like a supernova was detonating inside it. Immeasurable mental power and elemental resonance crashed through every single nerve like a tsunami. I could even see the magical elements drifting through the air, colors I had no names for. They moved like subjects catching sight of their king, swirling and leaping around me in frenzied celebration. Then, Shadow 3, the martial force that had annihilated the warlord with a single punch. It walked toward me step by step, radiating a terrifying vitality powerful enough to suppress an entire age. It didn't merge immediately. It stood before me, slowly raised both hands, and performed a deeply ancient martial salute. Then it became a blinding streak of crimson light and drove itself into my heart. A single heartbeat rang through the tiny room like a great iron bell. My body finally couldn't hold the weight of three extreme forces combined. It began to break apart. My skin split inch by inch. Blood erupted like a fountain. My muscles were torn apart by the savage energy, exposing white bone. My organs nearly liquefied under the heat and pressure. An ordinary person would have detonated in the very first instant of the merge. But I didn't die. Because I had the system's lifespan rewards, decades of extra life stacked up inside me, and a will forged unbreakable through countless deaths. I ground my teeth to powder, roaring without sound inside my mind. Against a force that could unmake the world, my body, once riddled by terminal illness, was like scrap iron thrown into a blast furnace. In absolute agony, it was forcibly reforged, flesh reborn, bones rebuilt. A new layer of skin covered my entire body, glowing faintly with dark gold light. Every muscle held enough force to shatter a mountain. Every drop of blood carried destructive magic. I was no longer the shadow puppet master who needed others to fight for me. In this moment, I had become a true god. I don't know how long it lasted. Eventually, the violent energy inside the rental room went quiet. I slowly opened my eyes. Left eye, deep as a black hole. Right eye burning with dark gold light. I stood up. No clothes, just a casual wave of my hand, and a cloak condensed from pure shadow magic draped itself across my shoulders. The faceless god emblem on my left chest pulsed with a light that made the heart clench. I looked up. My gaze seemed to pass straight through the ceiling to the storm-covered sky beyond. The moment the last shadow merged into me and I opened my eyes, the sky above the entire city cracked open at once. The cloud cover over Jeongju was ripped in two by an undetectable, terrifying force. The deep black vacuum of space showed through. Dark red bolts of lightning as thick as barrels tore through the rift. The entire city's gravity collapsed completely. Shattered stone, cars, even stray dogs drifted helplessly into the air. I stood at the window of the rental room and watched it all. Calm. I knew. The trace of energy I'd leaked during the merge had lit up like a searchlight in the dark, broadcasting my exact location to the entire world. Sure enough, under 3 minutes. At the edge of the sky, space buckled violently. The Man of War fleet that had been stationed in the Pacific jumped directly overhead through some enormously expensive large-scale dimensional relay formation. Then from every direction, the Heavenly Martial Sect's 18 golden body elders surged in, riding flying swords, sealing off the southeast. 12 nuclear-powered divine mechs, each 100 meters tall, sealed the northwest. The Holy Knights raised ancient divine weapons radiating sacred light and sealed every escape. The God-slaying alliance came out in full force. To kill me, they didn't spare a single thought for the tens of millions of civilians in Yeongju. They deployed an ancient killing formation called a 10-direction annihilation array directly around my crumbling apartment building. Found it. The high-energy source is in that building. Ethan's voice blasted from the flagship speakers, twisted with savage excitement. So the leader of the gods has been hiding in the slums all along. Everyone listen up. No capture. Activate maximum firepower. That building. The surrounding blocks. Erase all of it from the map. At his command, the entire sky ignited. Cannons charging. Devastating white light. The sect elders burned their own blood simultaneously, gathering a brilliant sword energy stretching 1,000 meters. The mech's nuclear cores roared deafeningly. 12 micro-antimatter missiles screamed forward on long trails of fire. Formation arrays, forbidden weapons, ancient sect heritage, modern military power. The single most concentrated, most all-out barrage the transcendent world had ever unleashed. Even a true god descending from above facing this would probably back away. But I just pushed open the crumbling wooden door of the rental room and walked out slowly. I faced the sky full of world-ending lights suspended in midair. My midnight cloak snapped in the howling wind. The faceless god emblem on my chest seemed to mock the ignorance of everyone watching. On the flagship deck, Sylvia stared hard at my blurred silhouette on the main screen. As an S-rank mental transcendent, the instant she saw me, her mind screamed with death warnings. Beside her stood the military's top fighter, General Lin. General, something is wrong. Sylvia's voice shook. Blood seeped from the corner of her eye. Mental power pushed past its limit. My mental detection can't get within 100 meters of him. How does one person carry both the aura of the spell god from the Arctic tundra and the martial god from the martial pinnacle? General Lin tightened his grip on the legendary sword at his side, the one said to be able to cut mountains in half. He stared hard at the screen. Cold sweat beaded on his forehead. This is impossible. How can one person master two paths to this level simultaneously? But there was no time to think. The barrage was already washing over me like a tsunami. Monster. Ethan laughed like a man unraveling in the command center, but the next second, his laughter cut dead. Against that overwhelming torrent of energy, I didn't even lift an eyelid. I simply raised my right hand and extended one finger. I pressed it gently forward into the boiling void. My lips parted slightly. One word. Break. No earth-shattering explosion. No deafening roar. The instant my fingertip pressed forward, with me at the center, the space within 10 kilometers shattered like a pane of glass hit by a hammer. Black fracture lines spreading in every direction in an instant. My true martial essence had seen through every energy node and every attack. My spell god mental power locked onto the fundamental logic of this space, and the body fused with limitless vitality supplied the raw violence to shatter all of it. Space itself, along with the sky full of mana beams, the 1,000-meter sword energy, the antimatter missiles, and even the 10-direction annihilation array blanketing the city, under my single finger, all of it became fragile paper toys, reduced to primal void particles in an instant. No explosion, because even the energy an explosion would release was swallowed by the fractured space. The world fell into dead silence. What had been a world-ending barrage 1 second left not a single spark the next. The backlash from the formation being forcibly erased made all 18 sect elders vomit blood simultaneously. They fell from the sky like rain. All 12 mechs went offline simultaneously, crashing to the ground trailing black smoke. The massive warfleet was caught in the shockwaves of the shattered space. Over a dozen outer warships disintegrated outright. A sharp crack rang across the flagship deck. General Lin's legendary sword hadn't even come into contact with my attack. It had merely felt the martial pressure contained within that single finger press, and let out a mournful cry before snapping in half. The sword saint dropped to his knees with a thud, eyes vacant, his martial conviction gone. Sylvia pressed both hands over her bleeding eyes, her whole body shaking violently. In that instant of shattering space, she had finally seen the truth beneath the black cloak. Not a person. A perfect law of existence, built from countless deaths and countless reconstructions. Sylvia murmured in despair, her voice saturated with fear. There was never any God's organization. From the very beginning, only one person. What we were hunting is a creature that has already surpassed the dimension of our understanding. Total silence. Ethan collapsed in his command chair, face the color of ash. Those untouchable faction leaders and sect masters, staring at the man suspended in mid-air, who had erased everything they had with a single finger, had lost even the will to run. I slowly lowered my hand. I brushed dust that wasn't there off my cloak. I didn't bother looking at the so-called powerful trembling like insects below. Instead, I looked up, and turned those eyes burning with dark gold fire towards something far above. A deeper gaze in the sky. The stellar observer's cold eyes, invisible to everyone but me, were watching. I looked at the people scattering in terror below, and asked a single calm question. Do you want to know who made this world? My voice was not loud, but carried by spell god mental power. It reached every corner of Jungju clearly, and through the satellite feeds that hadn't yet gone dark, it reached every person on Earth. On the ruins, Ethan sat collapsed on the ground like a beaten dog, trembling as he lifted his head. Sylvia pressed her hands over bleeding eyes, holding back the agony of a mind being torn apart, staring at me. Those once invincible faction rulers, all of them like ducks grabbed by the throat, unable to make a sound. The spiritual energy revival, the ancient ruins, the dungeons. I laughed coldly. I pointed at the massive rift above us, the one my single finger had cracked open to reveal the black vacuum of space. Did you really believe this was nature's gift? A god's blessing? You tore at each other like rabid dogs over scraps inside an S-rank dungeon. You started wars over it. But in the eyes of the ones who actually exist above this dimension, do you know what you are? I paused. My eyes went absolutely cold. You are bacteria in a petri dish, slaughtering each other over a few drops of mutated nutrients. Dead silence. No, this cannot be, General Lin screamed from his knees, voice breaking apart. If the world is just a petri dish, what was our cultivation for? What were thousands of years of martial heritage worth? Data. I destroyed his last illusion without mercy. Every breakthrough you made, every battle you fought, every death you died. All of it, just data uploaded to a higher dimensional universe. The so-called stars are the observers of this petri dish. They seed spiritual energy and dungeons to filter out the highest quality specimens, and then harvest them. I raised my hand. The pale blue system panel appeared in my palm, except now it had lost its color entirely, flickering madly in blinding crimson. Alert! Anomalous sample detected. Awakened sample has broken free of baseline logic control. Stellar Observer has intervened, initiating world line reset and elimination sequence. And me? I was just a glitch, a dying man who had accidentally slipped through a bug in their test code. I looked at that panel. My finger snapped shut. Crack. The system panel that had been with me for a full year shattered into a rain of light in my one hand. I didn't need it anymore. When all the shadows had become one with me, when my power had reached the ceiling of this dimension, this so-called system had become a chain holding me down. The moment the system shattered, the rift above let out a tearing sound that set teeth on edge. A deep rumble. The entire earth shook violently. Tsunamis rose into the sky. Volcanoes erupted in unison. Gravity lost all control. As billions of people across the world watched in despair, the black cosmic rift was forced wide open by a pair of invisible hands. Then, an eye appeared behind the rift, vast beyond description, built from countless shining celestial bodies and cold machinery. No pupil, only endless indifference. The moment it looked down at the earth, a dimensional pressure beyond comprehension crashed down on Jungju. Civilians and S-rank transcendents alike. Every single person dropped to their knees without being able to stop themselves. Ethan bled from every opening. Sylvia's mind was on the verge of total collapse. This was the absolute dominance of a higher life form over a lower one. Before it, the earth was a glass marble that could be crushed at any moment. Anomalous contamination source detected, initiating physical elimination. A vast, emotionless consciousness detonated inside every human mind simultaneously. Then, the great stellar eye began charging a beam of destruction capable of vaporizing the entire solar system in an instant. It's over, all over. Ethan closed his eyes in despair. The apocalypse wasn't zombies, wasn't nuclear war, it was a higher dimensional cleaning operation. But within that pressure that had forced all living things to their knees, I alone floated perfectly straight in midair. I looked up at that eye looking down from above, and suddenly laughed. The laughter grew. It became a roar of madness that shook the sky. I ripped the midnight cloak from my body and revealed that perfect form flowing with dark gold light. A year ago, I lay on a hospital bed reeking of disinfectant waiting to die. Even breathing hurt back then, and I was never afraid. Now I have died 10,000 times, run 10,000 simulations, chewed every piece of suffering and swallowed it whole. You think I'm going to be afraid of you? A voyeur hiding behind the curtain? I flung my arms wide. The dark gold fire in my eyes blazed to its absolute peak. Gods, take your places. At my roar, the space behind me began collapsing across a massive expanse. 1, 10, 100, 1,000, 10,000. Exactly 10,000 figures in midnight cloaks, the faceless god emblem on every chest, stepped out of the void. They were no longer puppets I had to control. After the system shattered and I claimed full mastery over the laws of existence, I combined the power overflowing inside me with the infinite split ability and replicated 10,000 fully realized shadows, each at 70% of my peak strength. 10,000 spell gods, 10,000 martial monsters, 10,000 extreme assassins. They filled the sky behind me in formation, a legion that had genuinely walked out of myth. Every single shadow's aura alone was enough to suffocate everyone in the so-called god-slaying alliance below. You love to observe, don't you? I raised my right hand, slowly closing it into a fist in the void. All 10,000 shadows made the exact same motion. 10,000 forces, each capable of destroying worlds, resonated in perfect unison. Today, I tear your observation room apart. I vanished in a flash, a dark gold streak that split the fabric of space, leading my 10,000 shadows forward, not retreating but charging, straight into the beam, capable of vaporizing the solar system, hurtling toward the colossal eye above. Two forces. The moment they collided, every sound on Earth ceased. Every source of light was swallowed. In the final second before losing consciousness, Sylvia poured out every last fragment of mental power and saw something she would never forget. The man named Daido O threw a single punch. That punch carried the combined force of 10,000 shadows, carried the true martial essence distilled from 10,000 deaths. It shattered the destruction beam and kept going without losing a single step, slamming straight into the stellar eye. Crack! A clean shattering sound rang through the entire solar system. The stellar eye, the embodiment of higher dimensional will, untouchable and absolute, was cracked by that single punch. A fracture spanning tens of millions of kilometers. Golden higher dimensional fluid poured from the fracture like a waterfall. Warning, petri dish shell damaged. Warning, target is breaching dimensional boundary. The stellar eye's mechanical alarm screamed with something that had never been in it before. Fear. I didn't give it a second to repair. I stepped across its shattered crystal, took my Shadow Legion, and tore the fracture wide open. One step out of the petri dish that had contained us for untold ages. The view changed in an instant. No Earth, no galaxy. I saw massive mechanical fortresses floating in endless void, saw energy pipelines connecting countless petri dishes just like Earth, and deep inside those fortresses, the ones who had always looked down from above, the stellar observers who called themselves gods, were staring through their monitors at me, an intruder who had broken in from below. For the first time, their eyes held none of that cold contempt for lesser creatures. In its place, the kind of bottomless terror a person feels when a demon climbs out of hell. I stood in the void. My Shadow Legion stretched behind me like a black ocean. I looked at the enormous gate ahead, radiating endless higher dimensional energy. A cruel smile at the corner of my mouth. The game has only just begun. When the stellar observers showed fear for the first time, I had already placed my hand on the door of the higher dimensional universe.